Welcome back to We the People. As we continue to track the pulse of American politics, we're seeing seismic shifts not only in party strategy, but in generational identity and voter behavior. Let's start with the Democratic Party, where the rise of socialist candidates is once again stirring deep internal conflict. A recent Wall Street Journal report highlights progressive contenders like Zoran Mandani and Omar Fateh, who are backed by groups like the Democratic Socialists of America and are making inroads in deep blue districts. These candidates are pushing hard left policies and positioning themselves as challengers to established Democrats, often running against the party's own leadership. But this isn't just about local races because some people are like, well, what does it matter if someone is a socialist running for city of New York or mayor of Minneapolis? It does matter because it's showing a different strategy. It's going from the bulk, but also makes a question, what the heck have we done that people feel that this is the way forward? When you have a member of Congress going in Mexico City saying that she's a Guatemalan before she's an American when she's a U.S. citizen. But I digress. This is a broader issue because it's about identity crisis within the Democratic Party itself, one that risks splitting its base between traditional liberals and a new, more radical activist wing. And remember, they tried pushing hard on these progressive issues and anti-Trump. And yes, I know they love to hate Trump. He's president, second term. Move forward with that. But they lost on all of these ideals. They forget that there is not just this extremist faction. It's about we the people. And honestly, this extreme faction that is coming out, these socialists, these anti-police officer, anti-capitalism, anti-America faction that is coming out and trying to behold and embracing it's socialism. It's not anything like what happened in USSR, or maybe they need to look at true history books or what happened in Venezuela or Cuba or any other multitude of countries. And stop looking to certain European countries saying, well, they're socialists. They're not true socialists. Because let me tell you something right now. If you're in Canada, you're on socialist medicine, you are SOL because you have to be on a waiting list. But if you have money for private insurance, you sure as hell got it. Just saying. But the stakes are very high, especially within the Democratic Party, because they are having a major crisis in a schism. And as these mayoral candidates that are gaining ground with the likes of AOC and Elizabeth Warren and other huge progressives, there is a critical question. Do they embrace this shift or risk alienating moderates, independents, older Democrats who feel increasingly disconnected from the party's new tone? This internal battle could have national consequences, especially heading into the midterms, where control of the House and Senate could hinge on turnout and messaging discipline. At the same time, there's a generational divide is making that messaging even more complicated. So, according to a Yahoo News analysis, Gen Z, America's youngest voting bloc, those college-age kids and the kids that are getting out of college, is anything but unified. While many young voters lean left, there's a noticeable and growing number, particularly among Gen Z men, who are registering as Republicans. This runs counter to the narrative we've heard for years that younger generations are reliably progressive or always go to the Democrats because they're in college and they hear that the liberal tones of the professors and such. Instead, we're seeing ideological drifts driven by frustration with cancel culture, the economy, and a sense that the left no longer reflects their values. What's more, Gen Z voters are driven less by party loyalty and more by perceived authenticity. Many feel politically homeless, disillusioned by the institutions that once promised change. That spells opportunity and risk for both Republican and Democrat. Democrats must now work twice as hard to hold the attention of Gen Z voters who may be slipping away, while Republicans see a rare opening to attract a younger, more diverse voter base. especially among young men disillusioned with identity politics and progressive outrage. And can you blame them? Since I would say 2020, for almost the past 5 years, what have young white males been told? You're evil, you're bad, all the woes are you. You can't get jobs, everything is the likes. Then again, what about young Black men? They're also now, oh, it's bad to be a man. It's about race. When people are looking around going, but yet it's not about race. Let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about job opportunities. Let's talk about how we can grow a future, how we can obtain housing, what is going on with the ability for us when we do have, and this is something millennials are now starting to see, is like, okay, we have kids. What are we going to, how are they going to be raised and taught and such? And while the Democrats navigate both ideological and generational divisions, President Trump is executing something entirely different. And this is one thing I'm going to have to go back to this Gen Z, because the Democrats still think that they have a lock on like the media. And personally speaking, it is so much. The mainstream media, that they're like, oh, it's so left-leaning, and it is. And then you have Fox News, right? But what is also interesting by this study is that Gen Z does not devote a lot of time to mainstream media. In fact, they get a lot of their news from passive sources, whether it's social media, whether it's X, whether it's just Reddit or something else. And if you really want to look at something that was, I would say, in my opinion, was a huge difference for the ability of Trump to gain on Gen Z voters, because he did have an upward movement in all categories of Hispanics, Blacks, but especially young men, Gen Zs. You had the likes of Charlie Kirk going to the universities, debating with these kids, allowing the kids to have an open mind, to ask questions, to say this, and to start talking, opening the conversation. We did not see for a long time this ability for conservative kids to be able to have a voice. And it was good. It's a good educational moment. You're starting to see this. And it's funny because I do watch, before I get to President Trump, I do watch TikTok a lot. I mean, I scroll through it. And I saw something about Gen X. And this is true. We were raised with critical thinking. We were taught in school and by our parents and when going through university that we have to see both sides, listen to both arguments and decide on our own what we align with and don't align with. And maybe, just maybe, this is what's going on with Gen Z, because they're not relying on just what they're hearing on the campuses. They're not just relying on what's on the news media or New York Times or newspapers. They're actually looking at other sources. But this is a huge thing, because it was always kind of like the bedrock for the Democratic Party. They always had the Black voters. They always had the Latino voters minus the Cubans, and they had the youth. Well, guess what? Not anymore. And are they, and that's the other question. Is this new progressive wing really shifting? Because even if you look at the mayoral candidate of New York that won the Democratic primary, he won with the vast majority of elite college-aged white children. Elite white kids. And one other thing that the Democrats need to figure out too is because their funding sources are now not as willing to open up their coffers and wallets, because after Harris, the run for Harris, which she raised $1 billion and spent over $1 billion, one thing is for sure, President Trump is fundraising like a first-term president, as if his reelection is dependent on it, even though he's second-termed and he's termed out. not because he has to, but because he intends to reshape the next phase of American politics and also to ensure that the midterms that the Republicans continue to maintain power, so he doesn't have to deal with the debacle of impeachments that he experienced in his first term. So unlike past second presidents who slowed down politically, Trump is ramping up. He's building a massive war chest, not just for the 2026 midterms, but to directly influence who gets elected and who doesn't. Trump is laser focused on loyalty, rewarding candidates who back his agenda, making it clear that disloyalty will be punished, which is Trump, but just rhetorically. He is also doing it financially. His aggressive strategy has already, his MAGA PAC has already raised over $176 million. And that's only in 6 months. This aggressive strategy reflects a president who is not simply managing the day-to-day, but positioning himself as the central architect of the GOP's future to maintain what MAGA, Make America Great Again, means and to go forward. He's controlling the narrative, the money, and the message, and he's already transforming the American or the Republican political machine into a single unified extension of the Trump movement. So while Democrats are debating identity, having a real crisis, also failing on every strategy they take, failing. Let's look to Illinois gerrymandering and then throw stones at while you're in major glass houses. Trump is expanding his power. He is not winding down. He is winding up. And America is watching. So that wraps tonight's episode of We the People. We've looked at the deep ideological fractures inside the Democratic Party, the generational shift redefining American voters, and a second-term president who is fundraising like a madman. How to say it. The political battlefield is changing, and in the months ahead, every move matters. Love what you're watching. Catch this episode of We the People and every Now Media TV show live or on demand anytime. Just download the free Now Media TV app on Roku or on iPhone's app and get instant access to all our bilingual content in English and Spanish. From politics and news to business, lifestyle, and culture. It's all streaming 24/7 whenever you're ready. Search Now Media TV and start watching today. I'm Alina Gonzalez Dockery. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time on We the People.